So there is nothing like waking up to Christmas, to tomorrow morning, or whenever your family celebrates Christmas. There is nothing like waking up to big boxes. Okay, how many of y'all remember, or some of my friends that are my little friends in here, how many of y'all like to wake up on Christmas morning and see big boxes? Right, yeah, raise that hand high, buddy. So does Chris McBroom. He wants big boxes too. When I was a kid, Grandma always sent the biggest box. And she learned that she had to like put whatever she got me inside of another box, because if there was any like space behind the paper, or you kind of push something in, you can start trying to figure out what's inside of there. Like she learned that lesson when I was like 5 years old, so I had to get two, like it was like double boxed. I remember one time when I was a kid and I woke up and Santa brought me this battleship game. Like not battleship like you're used to with the little like L4, like not that. This thing had like this sheet of plastic that probably measured, it was at least 3 by 6. It was probably more like 4 by 8. This is my 7-year-old memory here. But it was cool because it didn't have like it had like these, it had like destroyers and cruisers and aircraft carriers and battleships and like this. It was this whole like Navy like battle game. And I don't remember what the rules were. I would just play it because each ship was like a foot and a half long. And it had this little rubber band catapult inside of it. It would shoot these little like hard plastic discs out. And like every single battleship also had like slots on the side. And so if you could line it up just right and like throw the disc at it, the top of the battleship, like the little gun, would like pop off in the air and like land. Like it didn't work very good on carpet. I learned that Christmas morning. I cried a lot, and then Dad was smart enough to, well, let's put it over on the tile floor here. But like that thing was huge. Like when I was a kid, I wanted big presents. And let's not lie, when we're a kid, we always want big presents, okay? But the older you get, presents kind of change. Have you noticed that? I remember when I got a set of tires for Christmas from my parents in college. Like I needed those, but did I want a set of tires for Christmas? No. Okay, there's those practical Christmas gifts that we get sometimes. But then when you get older, those practical Christmas gifts get pretty handy. Like I get socks for Christmas from my mom every year, and she will keep me in socks for the whole year. Like I live in cowboy boots. I can tear a pair of socks quicker than anybody can. Like I got on Christmas socks on right now that somebody gave me. Like they're practical presents. But there's also these sentimental presents. Think back to that. Did anybody here get engaged at Christmas time? Little sentimental presents like that. Or maybe you got, ladies, you might have gotten some of your mom's or your grandmother's or your great-grandmother's jewelry at Christmas. Like small little boxes, but it means a lot. It's sentimental. Guys, you remember when you got your granddad's pocket knife? Like that sort of a thing? One of my favorite presents I ever got was this. It's this tiny little pair of pliers. And my grandfather actually tried to pull a tooth with these one time of mine, not his. Like I remember, like, come here, CD. That's what he called CD. My mom gave me these. My grandfather, when he was pretty late in life, said, give these to CD. And my mom gave me this like tiny little box. She's like, oh, your grandfather got you something. And I opened the box up and I like flipped out. Like I gave birth to a cat when I saw these things. Because they were special to me. Like I knew what was going on. He always wore those coveralls with his name embroidered on them. You know what I'm talking about? That's what's up. And he always had this little tiny pair of pliers. He's a diesel mechanic. For some odd reason, he always wanted this tiny little pair of pliers in his pocket. And so I actually use these things like that. They get used, but I always know exactly where they are. It's these tiny little presents, these small things that can mean a lot to us. These small, simple gifts that have the ability to change our lives in remarkable ways. And we're going to talk about small and simple today. We're going to talk about unassuming today. We're going to talk about what does it mean when the ordinary becomes extraordinary. But we're going to jump into the classic Christmas story. You can read it on your Bible. You can read it on your phone if you do that. Or you can read it on the screen behind me. As my friend Alan calls it, the Big Bible. I like that a lot. But let's listen to this familiar Christmas story and listen for the small, unassuming things. So Luke chapter 2, verses 6 through 7. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. And she gave birth to her first child, a son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. So honestly, I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we pass over these two verses in the Christmas story quite often. They're providing necessary details. They're not providing, there's nothing in there that I can pull out and say, well, 3,000 years ago, this meant this. There's no some super cool, secret, nerdy thing going on. This is just simple details. But this is what's amazing is that Mary did this. Verse 7 says she wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger, a sentence that we're going to find out is significantly more important than we might often realize. But Mary did this, and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. She had to take care of a baby. She swaddled him like people have swaddled babies for thousands of years, and she had to find a place to stick the baby, so she stuck him in a manger. I mean, when I was a kid, my mom said I slept in a bureau drawer for 2 months. Sometimes you just got to find a place to stick the baby. Okay? In those days before car seats, how many of y'all have memories of where you rode or where you put your babies when they rode? I was 6 days old, rode to my grandparents' house on a pillow in my mom's lap. And when she said when it got too hot, she had an apple crate on the passenger seat, and she just kind of whole pillow and popped me in there. Sometimes you just got to find a place to stick the baby. That's what Mary's worried about. One of the most human responses right after you have this child is, where are we going to keep this thing? She did this. But there's also a detail, a thought about this, is that this is Jesus. This is the baby Jesus, this is the Savior of the world. She's fully aware of what's going on right now. I heard multiple things on Facebook this week asking the question about, well, Mary, did you really know? Does anybody else not like that Christmas song? It's almost as bad as Christmas shoes. But Mary knew fully aware of what was going on that morning. And so she takes the baby Jesus, and she sticks him in the first place that she can find. But also, think about Jesus. Think about the way God chose to come into our world. He could come into our world. If me or you were thinking about how God would make his grand entrance into our world, we would probably try to make sure we had enough tables rented. We find the best place to do this. We'd start a Facebook event for it. We'd broadcast this out. But Jesus came to us in one of the most unassuming ways, because Jesus would not presume something upon us. He wanted there to be no question, so he came for everyone, for everywhere. It's not in the most normal way, but he came to us in the most human way. And some of this, I think, is a peek about why Mary gave birth to Jesus, why Mary was so important. What made God choose Mary is that she would not presume something else, that she did not make a big deal over this, that she did not go start the first century Bethlehem Facebook event for the night, that she simply treated it like an everyday, normal birth because she knew completely what was going on. There's also some shepherds in this story. These are my favorite part of the story, is the shepherds. When I was a kid, I was fascinated with the shepherds. And this is what we read. We start this in verse 12, and this is what they're told. And you will recognize him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth, lying in a manger. And suddenly the angel was joined by a vast host of others, the armies of heaven, praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth with whom God is pleased." When the angels returned to heaven, the shepherds said to each other, "Let's go to Bethlehem. Let's see this thing has happened, which the Lord has told us about." And so they hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. Now, a couple of things about these shepherds. So Bethlehem and Jerusalem are not too far off of each other. It's a half a day's walk. It's not too bad of a journey. Folks are used to that. I've driven from Sterlington to Monroe 6 times in one day. This is an everyday normal journey. And these shepherds, this is part of some of the oldest traditions of the church, and some of the oldest thoughts and writings and reflections on this story is that this was not just any herd of sheep. That this was the sheep that were kept to be sold for temple sacrifices. So if you're following the Jewish sacrificial law, these sheep were without fault, were without spot. They were not crippled in any way. These were the perfect of the perfect sheep. And there's a bunch of them. There was a lot of them. The temple went through sheep like crazy. And so these shepherds weren't just any shepherd, too. Think about it. Like, if you were a shepherd, the top gig in the land was watching the temple herd of sheep. And most of our manger scenes, we have a shepherd or two shepherds, maybe three shepherds. Y'all, I think there was a lot more shepherds than two or three of these guys. If they're watching, that possibly is the most important herd of animals in the entire country, this isn't the kind of job you trust to like three guys. There are probably dozens of these shepherds, and they see this angel, a single angel pop up. It's the same angel who made this announcement to Mary and to Joseph. And they have this whole moment here. They say there's a sign that you're going to go see, and it's a baby wrapped in cloth, and he's lying in a manger. We're going to talk more about that whole sign thing in a little bit. And then the whole host of heaven, the whole army of heaven pop up. And this is not like all of a sudden God sends it diverts every angel in creation to go see them at the time. But the language, it shows almost like their eyes, the veil has been lifted to allow them to see the heavenly reality, to allow them to see at that moment, maybe even at the moment of his birth, to see what was going on in the spiritual realm all around them, to have just a brief glimpse of the reality of heaven. So these dozens of shepherds decide they need to go see if this is real or not. This is a big enough of a deal for them to say, hey, we're going to leave our posts here. We're going to, they might have left two or three guys or a handful to watch the temple sheep, but for the most part, they said, we're going to pick up and we're going to get out of here and we're going to run down to Bethlehem and we're going to see what's going on. This sounds too good to be true. We're going to abandon our posts. And they find confirmation. We'll read verse 16 again to see this, and it's simple. And they say, they hurried to the village and they found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in the manger. Picture this. This is what I was thinking about this week. Picture this. So Bethlehem it's a village. It's not big, but it's of note. It's decent sized enough at the time. So there's dozens of these shepherds running all over the place trying to find this baby. So imagine they're kind of popping into every single house. You got a baby in a manger? Nope. All right. Going door to door kind of a thing. They're hollering at each other. You found it yet? And then I picture when the pair or the shepherd or whatever group it is actually sees Jesus and sees the baby in the manger, and there's this whole thing going on. To be honest with y'all, I thought of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Whoa. This thing is real. And then they start hollering to all over the rest of the village, we found them. And so this has to create quite a ruckus. And in order for them to make enough noise to get all the other shepherds over there, they're probably getting townspeople and other folks realizing what on earth is going on. Think about it, in your neighborhood, when something happens a couple houses down, you go outside and look real quick, don't you? We all do. Come on, let's be honest. And so there's countless people crowding into this place to see the baby Jesus, to see this simple confirmation of a majestic vision. The angel told the shepherds that this will be a sign. And signs are something important. Signs are something different. We had a whole sermon series on the signs this past summer. But a sign is an encounter with God in a way that leads to belief. That this sign was the simple, ordinary activity of Mary, taking care of a baby in the way that any other human person would take care of a baby. They'd swaddle it, and they'd find a place to put it. And this simple action, this simple decision of Mary, is what caused belief. It was the beginning of this whole thing. It's the beginning of the reason why many of us are sitting in this chair right here. That God took Mary's lead. He said, this sign that will cause belief across the whole world will be the action that any woman would do for any baby. That Mary, the vessel in which God chose to enter the world, was doing small, simple things. The small, simple things can change our life in remarkable ways. And it's the action of Mary and the shepherds that we can think about today. We can think about this morning. We can think about for the rest of the year. And we can cause that to push us forward as we move into the next year. But it's asking ourselves this question: how can we claim and experience Jesus in small but simple ways? the final part of our story, Luke 17 through 20. And this is what it says. After seeing him, the shepherds told everyone had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. And all who heard the shepherd's story were astonished. But Mary kept these things in her heart and thought about them often. The shepherds went back to their flocks, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen. And it was just as the angel had told them. See, both Mary and the shepherds had to move forward. They had seen something and encountered something and experienced something that would leave them never to be the same. Mary says she pondered. She thought about these things. She reflected. She turned them around in her head. How many of you have experienced something extraordinary and you spend weeks or months or even years thinking about what that was like? So she kept these things in her heart too. You know, she didn't broadcast things before, and she wasn't most certainly not going to broadcast things now. We're seeing more of the character of Mary. She had a prayerful heart. In many ways, I think we're seeing the reason why God chose her to enter this world. But she kept this story. Mary also speaks, it says she's called the favored one, that she is uniquely grace-filled. Mary sets up the idea of personal experience here. When we encounter Jesus, we're going to have a personal experience. But that personal experience, and we look at Mary's story all throughout the Gospel of Luke, that it is personal experience for the sake of others. That she contemplates and ponders and experiences the reality of Jesus deeply in her own heart, but then knows that that has to be turned outward. That does not happen for her, but that happened for everyone else in the world. And we can take that and we can lean into that ourselves, that we seek genuine personal experiences with Jesus this Christmas. But he's going to give us those personal experiences for the sake of others, not for the sake of ourselves. The shepherds. What do we need to do to experience a greater understanding of truth? Because think about this. The shepherd's job, like they are the shepherd of shepherds, they have like the best gig out there. Their job is to protect the temple sheep. So imagine this, like they go, however many there were, and they go see this whole thing, and then they go back to their sheep. Like the shepherds kept shepherding. And for several decades, and I imagine this story is like passed down. Hey, listen, let me tell you what happened about 15 years ago. Like one night this angel came and he said some crazy stuff, and then all these angels came and they sang a lot of really crazy stuff, and we saw a lot of crazy things, and we ran to we abandoned the sheep, don't tell anybody. And we ran to Bethlehem, we looked out through the whole town, and we found this whole thing was true, and this woman had this baby, and this baby is the one we've been waiting for. They're telling the story, all the while they're keeping these sheep for the temple sacrificial system. The system that's no longer needed because Jesus is here with us. They stayed to their post. They're willing to be risk takers. I think the lesson that we can gather from these shepherds this year is, what are we doing that is no longer saving us? What are the things that we trust that don't have the ability to help us in the end? What are the places of power that we give that don't actually exercise the power of God? To me, the shepherd story is a story that makes me ask myself, what do I need to change that's no longer working? How can I trust Jesus more fully and in new ways? What does it mean sometimes to do just simply what you're called to do? How can we take risks for Jesus this next year? That's what the shepherds have for us. But simple encounters with Jesus, they cause us to unravel all of our complicated issues. And it's in these small and these simple things that have the ability to change our life in remarkable ways.